Welcome back, my friend. Before tonight's story begins, take a quiet moment for yourself. Now, settle in, get comfortable, and let tonight's quiet journey begin. Somewhere in the Pacific Ocean, far beyond shipping routes, far beyond coastline, there is a place that was not meant to exist. It has no borders, no shoreline, no name that sailors gave it, and yet it grows slowly, quietly, almost invisibly, as if the ocean itself is remembering something we tried to forget. Tonight, we are not following a ship or a war or a great discovery made in triumph. We are following something else, something that does not move on its own, but is carried by currents older than memory. This is the story of what we leave behind and where it goes when we stop looking. The ocean before us. Long before plastic ever touched the surface of the sea, before engines crossed its vastness, before the lines on maps tried to divide it into something measurable, the Pacific Ocean was already moving, not in the way we usually imagine movement, not waves crashing against cliffs, not storms tearing across the horizon, but in a quieter way, a deeper way, a movement that did not announce itself. Beneath the surface, far from where the eye could follow, the ocean was slowly turning, circling, breathing in a pattern so vast that no single human life could witness it fully. These were the great ocean gyres, immense rotating systems of currents formed by the Earth's spin, by the wind, by the shape of continents that silently guided the flow of water over thousands of years. They did not rush. They did not hurry. They simply continued, day after day, century after century, like a thought that never quite finishes. If you had stood on the deck of a wooden ship hundreds of years ago, somewhere in the middle of the Pacific, you would have seen almost nothing unusual, just water, endless water, the surface rising and falling gently under a sky that seemed too large to comprehend. There would be no sign of the currents beneath you, no visible path to show that the water you were crossing was part of something vast and circular, and yet you would already be inside it, carried without knowing, moving in a direction chosen not by your will, but by forces that had been in motion long before your journey began. The ocean has always had this quiet power to carry things without asking permission, to gather without making a sound, to haul without ever appearing full. A branch falling from a distant shore, a fragment of seaweed torn loose by a storm, a piece of driftwood from a shipwreck no one remembers anymore. All of these could enter the current, and once they did, they would begin a journey that did not have a clear ending, not a destination, but a pattern, a slow orbit within the body of the sea. In these gyres, things rarely escape, not because they are trapped violently, but because they are gently kept. There is something almost paradoxical about it. The ocean, which feels so open, so infinite, so impossible to contain, also has places where movement becomes repetition, where drifting becomes circling, where time stretches into something that feels almost still. If you could follow a single piece of driftwood as it entered one of these currents, you would notice something strange. It would not move in a straight line. It would not travel from one shore to another. Instead, it would begin to curve, slowly at first, almost imperceptibly, until days became weeks, weeks became months, and the path it traced was no longer a journey forward, but a quiet rotation, a return that never quite returns. This is how the ocean remembers, not with intention, not with awareness, but with structure, with patterns that endure long after the things within them have changed. The water moves, the surface shifts, storms come and go, but the system remains, and anything that enters it becomes part of that memory. Long before humans understood these currents, they were already shaping the world. They influenced migration routes of marine life. They guided the paths of early sailors who did not yet know why certain winds seemed to carry them in circles. They gathered life, plankton, tiny organisms that drifted not by choice, but by surrender. And in gathering them, they created entire ecosystems, places where life accumulated, where food became abundant, where unseen worlds quietly flourished. Beneath the surface, there is a kind of stillness at the center of these rotating systems, not absolute stillness, but something close to it, a slowing, a softening of motion, as if the ocean itself was pausing for a moment in the middle of its endless movement. It is in these quiet centers that things tend to remain the longest, not forced to stay, but simply not carried away. If you imagine the Pacific Ocean as a vast breathing body, then the gyres are like its slow, steady heartbeat, not loud, not dramatic, but constant, reliable, always there, whether we notice them or not. And for thousands of years, this system worked in balance. What entered the ocean eventually returned to it in another form. Wood softened and broke down. Seaweed dissolved. Organic matter became part of the water again, feeding the cycles of life that depended on it. Nothing truly remained as it was. Everything changed. Everything became something else. The ocean did not need to reject anything. It simply transformed it, slowly, completely. But this balance depended on one quiet truth, that what entered the ocean could also be undone by it. That time, sunlight, salt, and motion were enough to return things to the cycle, and for a very long time, that was enough. There is something almost comforting about imagining the ocean this way, as a place that can absorb what we leave behind, a place that can take the fragments of the world and gently dissolve them back into something whole, a place that forgets, not by erasing, but by transforming. But this understanding, this quiet trust that the ocean could handle everything, would not last forever, because one day something new would enter these currents, something that did not break down the way everything else did, something that resisted time, something that did not return to the cycle. And when it entered the gyres, the ocean did what it had always done. It carried it, it gathered it, it kept it. Only this time, it could not let it go. And so the same system that once held life together would begin to hold something else, something quieter, more persistent, something that did not belong, but would remain all the same. The currents did not change. The ocean did not choose this. It simply continued as it always had. And that is where the story truly begins, not with the ocean, but with what we placed into it. Because the sea has always known how to remember. The question is, what are we asking it to remember now? 1997, a different kind of discovery. In 1997, somewhere in the vast stretch of water between Hawaii and California, a man named Charles J. Moore was sailing across the Pacific Ocean. He was not searching for anything unusual. There was no mission to discover something hidden, no expectation that this journey would become part of a larger story. He had just finished participating in a sailing race and was returning home. Like many who cross that part of the ocean, he chose a route that most sailors tend to avoid. It was quieter there, less wind, slower, a place where movement feels almost suspended, where the surface of the sea can stretch out in long, uninterrupted calm. To many sailors, it is an inconvenient path, but to the ocean, it is simply one of its many quiet regions, shaped by currents that move not with urgency, but with persistence. At first, nothing seemed out of place. The sky was clear, the water steady, the horizon unbroken. It looked like any other part of the Pacific. But then, gradually, something began to appear, not all at once, not in a way that would immediately alarm anyone, just small things. A fragment of plastic, a piece of something that did not belong to the natural rhythm of the sea. At first, it could have been dismissed. The ocean has always carried objects, even centuries ago. Debris from ships or coastal settlements would occasionally drift far from where it originated. A single piece of floating material meant very little in a space as vast as the Pacific. But then there was another and another and another. The pattern began to change. It was not just one object floating alone. It was many, scattered across the surface, appearing again and again. No matter where the boat moved, there was no clear source, no ship nearby that had spilled its cargo, no visible event that could explain why these fragments were here. Only presence, a quiet, persistent presence, the kind that does not announce itself, but refuses to disappear. As the journey continued, the realization grew slowly. This was not an isolated occurrence. This was not an accident. This was something that existed across a vast area, something that could not be traced back to a single moment in time. It had been forming long before anyone noticed. The ocean, as it always does, had been carrying what entered it, gathering, circling, holding. But what it was holding now was different. Plastic does not behave like the things the ocean had known before. It does not soften and dissolve into the water. It does not return to the cycle in the way organic materials do. Instead, it remains. It changes shape, becomes smaller, breaks into fragments, but never truly disappears. So when these pieces entered the ocean currents, they were not temporary visitors. They became part of the system, and the system, unchanged, did what it had always done. It kept them. As Moore continued across that quiet region of the Pacific, what he saw was not a defined mass, not a floating island of trash as people would later imagine. It was something more subtle, more difficult to grasp. Plastic appeared everywhere, but never in one place. It drifted alongside the boat, then slipped away, then returned again, as if it were part of the water itself. There were moments when the surface looked clear, almost untouched, and then, without warning, another piece would pass by, then another. There was no boundary to mark where it began, no edge to say where it ended, just a sense that this presence extended far beyond what the eye could see. The ocean had taken something small, something seemingly insignificant, and distributed it across a scale so large that it became almost invisible again. Not because it was gone, but because it was everywhere. That is what made this discovery different. It was not dramatic. It did not reveal itself in a single moment of clarity. There was no sudden realization that could be captured in a photograph or measured in a single observation. Instead, it unfolded slowly through repetition, through the quiet accumulation of details that, taken alone, meant very little, but together formed something impossible to ignore. Moore would later describe the experience not as discovering a place, but as encountering a condition, a state of the ocean that had changed, something that had been there, unnoticed, growing over time, shaped not by a single action, but by countless small ones. Each piece of plastic had its own origin: a bottle used once and discarded, a bag carried by wind from land to water, fragments from objects that had already begun to break down somewhere else. None of them seemed important on their own, but the ocean does not measure importance the way humans do. It does not distinguish between what matters and what does not. It simply receives, and what it receives, it carries. So over years and then decades, these fragments entered the currents. They moved slowly into the gyre, and once there, they remained, not fixed in place, but circling, always circling. When Moore crossed that part of the Pacific, he was not seeing something new in the sense of something that had just appeared. He was seeing something that had already existed for years, perhaps longer, quietly forming without recognition, a structure without edges, a system without intention, a consequence without a single cause. And what made it even more difficult to understand was how easily it could be overlooked. From a distance, the ocean still looked the same: blue, vast, endless. There was no visible sign to indicate that anything had changed, no dramatic contrast to draw attention. Only when you moved through it slowly, when you stayed long enough to notice the repetition, did the pattern begin to reveal itself, piece by piece, moment by moment, until it was no longer possible to pretend that it was random. The discovery in 1997 did not create the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. It revealed it. It gave shape to something that had already been there, waiting not to be found, but simply to be seen. And even then, what was seen was only part of the whole, because what floats on the surface is only a fraction of what the ocean holds. Much of it is smaller, harder to detect, suspended just beneath visibility, carried in the same currents, moving in the same slow circles, beyond the reach of casual observation. The ocean had accepted it all without resistance, without judgment. It had done what it always does. It kept what it was given, and in doing so, it transformed a series of small, forgettable actions into something vast, something continuous, something that could no longer be understood as separate from the ocean itself. What was discovered in 1997 was not just a place, it was a realization, a quiet recognition that the ocean does not forget what we leave behind. It only redistributes it, spreads it, holds it within patterns that are far larger than any single moment of human attention. And once something enters those patterns, it becomes part of a story that does not end easily, a story that continues to move, slowly and silently, across the surface of the sea, carried by currents that never stop. Not an island, but a presence. When people first heard about it, many imagined something solid, an island of trash, a floating mass, so dense that you could see it from far away. Something with edges, something you could point to on a map and say, it is there. But the reality is quieter than that and more difficult to understand. The Great Pacific Garbage Patch is not an island. There is no ground beneath it, no place to stand. If you were to sail through it, you might not even realize you had arrived. There is no moment where the ocean suddenly changes color, no line drawn across the water to separate clean from polluted, only a subtle shift, a feeling that something is no longer quite the same. Most of what exists there cannot be seen at first glance. The pieces are too small, not large objects floating side by side, but fragments broken down by sunlight, worn away by salt, softened by time. Plastic does not disappear. It becomes smaller and smaller until it drifts just beneath the threshold of attention. If you look out across the surface, you may see nothing unusual, just the slow movement of water, light reflecting, waves rising and falling with a steady rhythm. And then, if you look longer, a small piece passes by, then another, then nothing again, then something else. It does not gather in one place the way we expect things to gather. It spreads, it thins itself across distance. It becomes part of the ocean's texture rather than something separate from it, like dust in the air, not always visible, but always present. This is what makes it difficult to fully grasp. Human perception looks for boundaries. We understand things by where they begin and where they end. We look for shapes, for edges, for clear definitions. But the garbage patch does not offer any of these. It is not a place you arrive at. It is a condition you pass through. And because of that, it resists attention. It does not demand to be seen. It does not interrupt the surface of the ocean in a way that forces recognition. Instead, it exists quietly, persistent, but almost invisible. If you were to lower your hand into the water there, you might feel nothing different. The temperature is the same. The movement is the same. The ocean still breathes as it always has. But within that same water, there are things that were never meant to be there. Tiny fragments moving alongside plankton, particles small enough to be mistaken for part of the natural world. And in a way, they have become part of it, not by belonging, but by remaining. There is a quiet transformation that happens over time, not of the plastic itself, but of how it exists within the ocean. At first, it is clearly foreign. A bottle, a bag, something recognizable, something that carries the memory of where it came from. But as time passes, that clarity fades. Edges soften, forms break apart, identity dissolves, until what remains is no longer an object in the way we understand objects, but a presence distributed, fragmented everywhere and nowhere at the same time. And this is where the ocean begins to change in a way that is harder to see, not through sudden disruption, but through quiet integration. The plastic does not sit on top like something separate. It drifts within, moves with the currents, circles in the same patterns that once carried only life. It becomes part of the movement, part of the system, and yet it does not belong to the cycle that system was built for, because everything else that enters the ocean eventually returns to something else. But this does not. It stays, and in staying, it slowly reshapes what the ocean holds. There is something almost paradoxical about its presence. The more it spreads, the less visible it becomes. The larger it grows, the harder it is to define. It does not concentrate into something we can easily confront. It diffuses, softens its own edges, blends into the background of something far greater, and so it remains not as a single place, but as a condition that continues to exist without ever fully revealing itself. If you imagine the ocean as a vast, living memory, then the garbage patch is not a single entry written clearly on the surface. It is a pattern woven into the whole, something that cannot be isolated without understanding everything around it, something that does not end when you leave it behind, because it is still there, moving, circling, remaining. And perhaps that is what makes it most difficult to face. Not that it is large, but that it is quiet. Not that it is visible, but that it is always there, just beyond the point where we stop looking. And in that quiet, the ocean continues to carry it as it always has, without resistance, without judgment, only remembering. The slow accumulation. Nothing dramatic created it. There was no single moment when the ocean changed, no day when someone could stand at the edge of the sea and say, "This is where it began." It did not arrive like a storm. It did not appear like a ship on the horizon. It formed in a way that is much more familiar to human life. Slowly, quietly, almost without being noticed. A bottle used once, then thrown away. A plastic bag caught by the wind, lifted just enough to escape the ground, carried beyond a street, beyond a city, until it finds water. A fishing net, damaged and abandoned, drifting without purpose after it is no longer useful. Small things, ordinary things, the kind of objects that pass through human hands every day without leaving a strong impression. None of them feel important in isolation. None of them seem capable of becoming something vast. And yet, the ocean does not measure things by importance. It does not decide what should stay and what should go. It simply receives. When something enters the water, it begins to move, not according to intention, but according to current. It drifts, sometimes slowly, sometimes carried farther than anyone would expect, across coastlines, across open sea, into regions where movement becomes circular, where paths no longer lead outward, but around. A single object does not change anything. Even 100 objects do not change anything. The ocean is too large, too vast, too forgiving at first, but time changes scale. What feels small in a day becomes something else in a year. What feels invisible in a year becomes something else in a decade. And what feels insignificant across decades begins to accumulate into something that no longer fits the word small. The accumulation does not happen in one place. It happens everywhere, at once, from different shores, different cities, different countries, each with its own rhythms of use, of disposal, of forgetting, all feeding into the same system. The ocean connects these distant points without effort. What leaves one coastline does not stay there. It travels, carried by currents that do not recognize borders, that do not pause at lines drawn on maps, that move continuously, linking one place to another in ways that are rarely visible from land. So the accumulation is not the result of a single action. It is the result of many, layered over time, so gradually that no single moment feels responsible. This is what makes it difficult to see clearly. There is no single cause to point to, no event that can be isolated and undone, only a pattern repeated again and again. A piece of plastic enters the ocean. It drifts, it circles, it remains. Another piece enters, then another, each one small, each one forgettable, each one easy to ignore. But the ocean does not forget. It does not remove what it cannot break down. It does not return it to where it came from. It holds it, allows it to move, allows it to gather, and as more pieces enter, the pattern begins to change, not suddenly, but gradually, so gradually that the change itself becomes difficult to perceive. At first, the difference is almost nothing. A few more fragments than before, a slightly higher chance of encountering something that does not belong. Still easy to overlook, still easy to dismiss, but over time, the repetition builds. The presence becomes more consistent, more difficult to ignore, not because it becomes concentrated, but because it becomes continuous. This is the nature of slow accumulation. It does not overwhelm, it surrounds. There is no single moment when it becomes visible, only a growing awareness that something is no longer rare, that what once felt occasional now feels familiar. And this familiarity is quiet. It does not create urgency. It does not demand attention. It simply settles into the background, becomes part of what is expected. This is how large changes often occur, not through sudden disruption, but through gradual acceptance. The ocean continues to move, the currents continue to turn, the system remains the same. Only what is being carried has changed, and because the change is slow, it does not feel like change. It feels like continuity, like something that has always been there. But it has not always been there. There was a time when the gyres carried only what the ocean could transform, when everything that entered would eventually return to another form, become part of the cycle again. Now that cycle is interrupted, not broken completely, but altered, because what is being added no longer follows the same rules. It does not dissolve, it does not disappear, it remains, and as it remains, it accumulates, not in piles, not in visible masses, but in presence, spread across distance, carried through time, layered into the movement of the sea. The accumulation is not loud. It does not declare itself. It simply continues. And that is what makes it powerful, because anything that continues long enough, no matter how small it begins, eventually becomes something that cannot be ignored. Not because it suddenly changes, but because it never stops. The ocean has always been patient. It does not rush. It does not resist. It does not forget. And so it holds this accumulation the same way it has held everything else, quietly, continuously, without interruption. And over time, what began as countless small, separate actions becomes something unified, not by design, but by persistence. A presence that was never planned, never intended, but now exists all the same. And still, The process continues because even now, somewhere far from where the currents turn, something small is being discarded, something light enough to be carried, something easy to forget, and the ocean, as it always has, is waiting. When things do not disappear. By the time something enters the ocean, it has already been used, already touched by human hands, already passed through a moment where it had purpose, and then that purpose ended. For most of human history, what we left behind did not stay for long. Wood softened, cloth unraveled, food returned to the water and became part of something else. Time was enough to undo what had been made. The ocean did not need to reject anything. It simply waited, and in waiting, everything changed. But plastic is different. It does not respond to time. In the same way, it does not soften into nothing. It does not return to the cycle that once held everything together. Instead, it lingers. When sunlight touches plastic, it begins to change, not in a way that removes it, but in a way that alters its form. It becomes brittle, its surface weakens, it cracks, and then, slowly, it breaks, not into nothing, but into smaller pieces, fragments, each one lighter, each one easier to carry. A bottle does not disappear. It becomes many things, pieces too small to recognize as what they once were, pieces that no longer carry the memory of their original shape, and as they become smaller, they become harder to see. This is where the ocean begins to change in a quieter way, not at the surface, where objects can still be noticed, but beneath it, tiny particles drift alongside plankton, suspended in the same water, moving in the same currents. There is no clear boundary between what belongs and what does not. If you could look closely enough, you would see that the water is no longer just water. It holds things that were never meant to be part of it, and yet they move as if they are. This is what makes plastic difficult for the ocean to carry, not because it is heavy, but because it does not complete its journey. Everything else that enters the sea eventually becomes something else. It changes form until it can be absorbed, reused, transformed. Plastic does not follow this path. It only becomes smaller versions of itself, and in becoming smaller, it becomes more widespread. A single object can turn into thousands of fragments, each one capable of drifting farther than the original ever could, each one able to reach places that larger objects cannot, into deeper water, into quieter regions, into spaces where movement is slow and escape is unlikely. The ocean does not push these fragments away. It carries them the same way it carries everything else. But there is a quiet imbalance now, because what is being carried is no longer part of a cycle. It is part of a loop that does not close. There is something almost invisible about this process. From a distance, nothing seems to change. The ocean still moves, still reflects the sky, still appears vast and unchanged. But within that same water, there are countless fragments that remain. They do not gather into something that demands attention. They disperse, and in dispersing, they become part of the background. This is how something can grow without appearing to grow, not by becoming larger in one place, but by becoming present in many places at once. If you were to take a single handful of water from somewhere in the open ocean, it might look clear, unchanged, but within it, There may already be particles too small to see, and this is where the story becomes more difficult to follow, because what cannot be seen is harder to remember, and what is harder to remember is easier to ignore. The ocean has always transformed what it receives, but now it is holding something that resists transformation, something that remains even as it changes shape, something that does not return to the cycle but continues within it. And so, beneath the surface, a quieter world begins to form, not made of large objects, not made of visible debris, but of fragments, drifting, circling, remaining, and the ocean, as it always has, continues to carry them without pause, without judgment, only forward. The invisible layer. There is a moment somewhere between what can be seen and what can no longer be noticed, where things begin to disappear from attention, but not from existence. When plastic breaks apart, it does not fall away into nothing. It becomes something quieter, something that no longer reflects light in a way that catches the eye, something that drifts just beneath recognition. These fragments are called microplastics, but even that word feels larger than what they truly are, because many of them are smaller than grains of sand. Some are smaller still. If you held one in your hand, you might not feel it. If you looked at it, you might not see it. And yet, they are there. They move through the ocean in the same way everything else does, carried by currents, lifted and lowered by the slow rhythm of the water. But unlike larger pieces, they do not stay at the surface. They drift downward, not quickly, not all at once, but gradually, a quiet sinking, interrupted by movement, carried again, then lowered once more, until they exist not in one place, but across many layers of the ocean at once. This is what makes them different. They are not just on the surface, where they can be seen. They are within the water itself, suspended. If you imagine the ocean as something clear and open, then this is the part that changes that image, because the water is no longer empty. It holds something else now, not enough to make it opaque, not enough to change its color, but enough to alter what exists within it. There is a quiet blending that happens here. Microplastics move alongside plankton, the small, drifting organisms that form the foundation of ocean life. They follow the same currents, occupy the same space, exist within the same scale, and because of this, they are no longer separate in any clear way. To something moving through the water, there is no visible difference, no signal to distinguish what belongs and what does not. Only particles, some living, some not, all drifting together. There is something almost silent about this merging. No sound, no visible boundary, no moment of transition that can be clearly marked. Just a gradual shift in what the ocean contains. And because it happens at such a small scale, it does not feel urgent. It does not create the kind of image that forces attention. There are no large shapes to confront, no single object to point to, only an accumulation that is too fine to be easily held in the mind. This is the invisible layer, not hidden intentionally, not placed out of reach, but existing just beyond the limits of ordinary perception. If you were to move through this water, you would not feel it. If you were to look across the surface, you would not see it. And yet, it is there, present in a way that does not demand recognition. There is a quiet shift that comes with this kind of presence. When something is large, it can be avoided. When something is visible, it can be confronted. But when something is dispersed, when it exists everywhere in small amounts, it becomes part of the background, something that is easier to live with than to fully understand. And so the ocean continues to carry this invisible layer, not as a surface phenomenon, not as a single location, but as something woven throughout its movement, from the topmost water touched by sunlight to deeper regions where light begins to fade, carried, circulated, remaining. And within this quiet presence, the ocean becomes something slightly different than it once was, not entirely changed, not suddenly transformed, but subtly altered in a way that is difficult to measure without looking closely. And even then, what is seen is only a fraction of what exists, because most of it is too small to be easily noticed, too quiet to announce itself, too persistent to disappear. And so it remains, not as something separate from the ocean, but as something the ocean now carries within itself, a layer that cannot be seen from a distance, but is always there, moving slowly through water that still appears unchanged. And in that stillness, the currents continue, carrying everything forward together. The quiet encounter. In the ocean, there is no moment of introduction, no clear meeting between what belongs and what does not. Things do not pause to recognize each other. They simply drift. And so, within this invisible layer, something begins to happen. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but quietly. Life continues as it always has. Small organisms move through the water without direction, carried by currents older than themselves. They feed, they drift, they exist within a rhythm that has repeated for millions of years. And within that same space, the fragments remain, not separate, not distant, but present in the same water. There is no boundary to keep them apart, no line drawn between the natural and the artificial, only proximity. And in that proximity, encounters begin. A particle passes close enough to be taken in, not by intention, not by mistake in the way we understand mistakes, but simply because there is no difference at that scale to something that lives within drifting particles. A fragment is just another particle. There is no signal to warn against it, no feature that sets it apart clearly enough to be avoided, only shape, only size, only movement. And so the interaction happens without recognition, quietly. A fragment becomes part of a moment, taken in, carried briefly, released again, or passed onward in ways that are difficult to trace. Nothing stops, nothing announces itself. The ocean continues to move as it always has. And within that movement, these encounters repeat, not once, not occasionally, but continuously, across distance, across time. Each interaction small, each one almost impossible to observe on its own. And yet, together, they form something larger, not in a way that can be seen as a single event, but as a pattern of contact between what was always part of the ocean and what has recently entered it. There is something quiet about this coexistence. No conflict, no visible disruption, only a merging of presence. And because it is quiet, it does not draw attention. It does not create urgency. It simply becomes part of what is happening. This is how changes take root in places that are difficult to see, not through force, not through sudden impact, but through repetition, through small interactions that accumulate over time. A fragment here, a moment there, again and again, until what was once separate is no longer experienced as separate. It becomes part of the environment, part of the movement, part of the quiet continuity of the ocean itself. And still, the water looks the same. From above, nothing appears different. The surface reflects the sky. The waves rise and fall in familiar patterns. There is no visible sign of what is happening below, only a vast calm that hides the countless small encounters taking place within it. This is what makes it difficult to fully grasp, because what changes is not the surface, but the relationships within the water. What meets, what passes through, what continues onward without pause. And so the ocean carries this as well, not just the fragments themselves, but the interactions they become part of, a quiet network of moments that do not leave visible traces, but remain all the same. And in that quiet, the pattern continues, unseen, unheard, but never absent. Because once something enters the ocean, it does not simply exist on its own. It becomes part of everything it touches and everything it continues to move with, carried forward by currents that never stop. The depths that receive. Not everything remains near the surface. What begins in light does not always stay there. The ocean is layered, not in a way that can be seen clearly, but in a way that can be felt. If you move deeper at the top, there is light, movement, waves shaped by wind, reflections that shift with the sky. Below that, the light softens, colors begin to fade, motion becomes slower, more deliberate, and deeper still, there is a quiet that is difficult to imagine. From above, a stillness, not of emptiness, but of distance from everything familiar. This is where things arrive after they have drifted long enough, not by intention, not by force, but by time. The smallest fragments, the ones that no longer float easily, begin to sink, not all at once, not in a straight descent. They move downwards slowly, interrupted by currents that lift them again, carry them sideways, then release them once more. A long, uncertain path between surface and depth. Some remain suspended for a long time, drifting between layers, never fully settling, but others continue downward into regions where the water grows colder, where light no longer reaches, where movement is reduced to something almost still. This is not a place of emptiness. It is a place of quiet reception. Things that arrive here tend to remain, not because they are held tightly, but because there is little to carry them away. The currents that once moved them with wide circular motion no longer have the same strength. What reaches this depth enters a different kind of stillness, a stillness that does not return easily to the surface. And so the fragments settle, not in piles, not in visible layers that can be clearly marked, but as part of the environment, resting among particles that have always belonged there. Fine sediments, organic remains that have slowly descended over time. Everything that reaches this level becomes quieter, less visible, less disturbed, and in that quiet, it remains. There is something almost final about this movement downward, not an ending, but a removal from attention. What sinks below is no longer part of what we see. When we look at the ocean, it does not appear in reflections. It does not move with waves. It exists in a space that is rarely observed. And because of that, it becomes easier to forget. But the ocean does not forget. It holds what reaches its depths with the same patience. It shows at the surface. Only here, the movement slow. The repetition softens. What arrives is not carried endlessly in circles. It rests, and in resting, it becomes part of a quieter accumulation, one that does not drift widely, but remains in place. There is no boundary that separates what belongs here from what does not, only presence. And over time, that presence grows, not in a way that can be easily measured, but in a way that continues without interruption. This is the part of the ocean that receives without returning, a deeper layer of the same story. What begins at the surface does not stay there. It moves downward, carried by time, guided by gravity, until it reaches a place where movement slows enough for it to remain. And once it remains, it becomes part of something that is no longer in motion, not gone, not dissolved, but held quietly far below where light can follow. And still, the ocean continues above, unchanged in appearance, while beneath it another layer forms, one that does not rise again, one that stays. A new kind of habitat. Out in the open ocean, far from land, life has always been sparse, not empty, but spread thin. There are no forests here, no reefs rising from the seabed, no fixed places where life gathers in visible abundance, only drifting. Small organisms carried by currents, creatures that survive not by staying, but by moving with the water that never stops moving. In this kind of world, anything that offers structure becomes important. A piece of driftwood, a cluster of seaweed, something solid, something that remains long enough to be returned to. These are rare, and because they are rare, they become places. Not places in the way humans define them, but points of gathering, moments of stability in a world that is always in motion. And now, something else has entered this drifting world. Plastic, not as a single object, but as many fragments, pieces, surfaces that do not dissolve. At first, they are just that, objects, but time changes how they exist. As they remain in the water, they begin to collect what the ocean already carries. Thin layers of life form on their surfaces, microscopic at first, almost invisible, then slowly more a film, a texture, something that transforms a smooth surface into something that can be inhabited. And once that happens, the fragment is no longer just an object. It becomes a place, something that can be returned to, something that can be used, something that can be lived upon, even if only briefly. In a world where most things drift freely, this kind of presence changes behavior. Life begins to gather. Small organisms attach themselves to these surfaces. They remain for as long as the fragment remains. And because the fragment moves, they move with it, carried across distances they could not reach on their own. This is not new to the ocean. Floating objects have always created small, temporary ecosystems. But there is a difference now. Before, these objects were few, scattered, temporary. Now, they are many, not concentrated in one place, but present across large distances. And because they do not break down the way natural materials do, they remain longer, long enough for patterns to form, long enough for something more consistent to begin emerging. This is how a new kind of habitat appears, not built, not designed, but formed through persistence. A surface enters the ocean. It remains. It gathers life. It continues moving. And as more surfaces appear, these small habitats become more common, not stable in the way land is stable, not fixed in one location, but repeating, appearing again and again within the drifting world. There is something quiet about this transformation. No sudden change, no moment when the ocean becomes something else. Only a gradual shift in what exists within it. Where once there was mostly open water, there are now countless small points of attachment, places where life can gather, even if only temporarily. And because they are temporary, they are constantly changing, forming, drifting, separating, reforming again, somewhere else. A moving network of small, shifting habitats. And within this network, life adapts, not by choosing this change, but by existing within it, using what is available, responding to what remains. There is no intention in this process. The ocean does not decide to create something new. It simply carries what it is given, and life, as it always has, finds a way to exist within what is present. And so, within the drift, something unfamiliar begins to feel almost natural, not because it belongs, but because it persists long enough to be used. And in that quiet persistence, a new pattern forms, one that was never planned, one that continues as long as the fragments remain, carried across the ocean together. The creatures that follow. Out here, in the open ocean, nothing truly stays still. Everything moves. Even what appears to remain is only pausing for a moment within a larger flow. And yet, life has always known how to follow. Follow currents, follow temperature, follow the quiet signals that travel through water without sound. It does not need direction in the way we understand direction. It responds. And so, when something new begins to appear again and again within this drifting world, life begins to follow that too. Not with awareness, not with choice, but through repetition. A fragment drifts, a small surface moves differently from the water around it. It slows slightly, it interrupts the flow just enough to be noticed by something that does not see but senses. A creature passes near it once, then again, then remains a little longer. There is no decision to stay, only a moment that extends itself into another moment. This is how following begins, not as a path, but as a pattern. In a place where there are few points of reference, even the smallest difference can become something to return to. A piece of plastic is not alive. It does not call. It does not attract in the way living things do. And yet, its presence changes the movement around it. Water shifts slightly as it passes. Small particles gather near it. Light touches it differently than it touches open water. These are quiet differences, but in the ocean, quiet differences are enough. Some creatures begin to remain near these fragments for longer periods of time, not permanently, but longer than they would remain in empty water. And over time, these brief moments of presence become more consistent, not fixed, not stable, but repeating. A fragment moves through the current. A small cluster of life moves with it, not because they are attached, but because they are nearby, often enough that their movement begins to align. This is how association forms in a place without boundaries, not through connection, but through proximity. Over time, some creatures begin to use these drifting surfaces as temporary shelter, a place where movement is slightly slower, where the open expanse feels, for a moment, less open. Others follow. What gathers there? Not the fragment itself, but the small changes that form around it. Where there is presence, there is interaction. Where there is interaction, there is repetition, and repetition becomes pattern. There is something subtle about the way this spreads. No sudden shift in behavior, no clear moment when life begins to change direction, only a gradual alignment with something that continues to appear. The more fragments there are, the more often these moments occur. The more often they occur, the more familiar they become. And familiarity, even in the absence of awareness, guides movement. So the creatures follow, not the object, but the pattern that surrounds it. A movement that repeats just often enough to become part of what is expected. And in this way, something that was never alive becomes part of the paths that life takes, not as a destination, not as a home in the way we understand home, but as something that is encountered again and again within the drift. And because it is encountered again and again, it begins to shape how movement happens within that space, not by force, not by design, but by presence. The ocean does not separate what should be followed from what should not. It only carries, and what is carried long enough in enough places becomes part of what is followed. And so the fragments continue to move, and life continues to move with them, not together, but not entirely separate either, drifting within the same currents, repeating the same quiet encounters until the pattern no longer feels unusual, until it simply feels like part of the ocean itself. What stays? What changes? In the ocean, nothing remains exactly as it was. Even the most stable patterns are made of constant movement. Water flows, currents shift, life adapts without pause. And yet, there is a difference between what changes and what endures within that change. For a long time, everything that entered the ocean eventually became something else. Forms dissolve, edges softened. What was once separate became part of a larger cycle. Nothing stayed as itself forever. But now there are things that follow a different path. They change in shape, but not in nature. A piece of plastic does not remain whole. It cracks, it breaks, it becomes smaller. But even as it changes, it does not leave what it is. It does not return to the cycle in the same way everything else does. And because of that, it creates a different kind of presence within the ocean. One that is not temporary in the way most things are. One that continues through change without disappearing. This is where the quiet difference begins to take form, not in what is seen, but in what remains. Life continues to move, as it always has. Creatures drift, feed, follow patterns that were shaped long before anything new entered the water. And yet, within those same patterns, there are now elements that do not follow the same rule. They do not fade away. They do not dissolve into something else. They persist, and because they persist, they begin to influence what surrounds them in subtle ways, not by force, not by disruption, but by duration. Anything that remains long enough becomes part of the environment in which other things exist, not because it belongs, but because it is there again and again. This is how something unfamiliar slowly becomes accepted, not consciously, not by choice, but by repetition. Over time, a fragment is encountered again, then again, until its presence no longer feels unusual. It becomes part of what is expected within the movement of the ocean. And once something becomes expected, it begins to shape how life moves around it, not dramatically, not in a way that can be easily measured, but quietly through small adjustments, small continuities, a path that shifts slightly, a pattern that repeats a little differently than before. None of it sudden, none of it obvious, and yet over time, these small differences accumulate just as the fragments themselves once did. There is something almost mirrored in this process. What enters the ocean in small amounts becomes something larger through persistence, and what changes within the ocean does so in the same way, not through a single moment, but through countless small moments that continue without interruption. Life does not stop. It does not pause to recognize the difference between what was always there and what has only recently arrived. It continues, and in continuing, it adjusts, not towards something new, but within what now exists. This is how the ocean changes, without appearing to change. The surface remains familiar, the movement remains steady, but within that movement, something has shifted. What stays is no longer the same as what once stayed. What changes does not always return to something else, and in that difference, a new balance begins to form, not stable, not complete, but ongoing. A balance shaped not only by what belongs to the ocean, but by what remains within it without ever truly becoming part of it. And so the ocean continues to carry both what changes and what does not, what dissolves and what persists, together within the same movement that never stops. And in that movement, the line between them becomes harder to see, not because it disappears, but because it is crossed again and again until it no longer feels like a boundary at all. The pattern that continues. There is no clear ending to what has begun. Out in the open ocean, nothing gathers into a final form. Nothing reaches a point where it can be said to be complete. Everything continues. The fragments drift. Life moves among them. The currents turn as they always have. And within this movement, the patterns that have formed do not settle into something fixed. They repeat, not in exactly the same way each time, but close enough that the difference is difficult to notice. A fragment appears, something gathers around it. Movement adjusts slightly, then the fragment moves on, and somewhere else, the same sequence begins again. Not identical, not synchronized, but familiar. This is how a pattern continues without ever becoming still. There is no center to this system, no single place where everything gathers, only a network of small, shifting interactions spread across distance, each one brief, each one incomplete, and yet Together, they form something that endures, not because any single part remains, but because the process itself does not stop. The ocean does not hold on to one moment. It replaces it with another, and then another. So what continues is not the same fragment, not the same creature, not the same encounter. What continues is the pattern of their interaction, a repetition that moves forward without needing to return. There is something quiet about this kind of continuity. It does not build toward a visible result. It does not accumulate into something that can be pointed to and clearly understood. It simply persists, and because it persists, it becomes part of how the ocean now moves, not in its currents, not in the force of its water, but in the relationships within it. What meets, what passes, what remains long enough to be encountered again. These are the patterns that now exist within the larger movement of the sea. They are not separate from the ocean. They are carried by it, and because they are carried, they continue. There is no moment when the ocean resets, no point at which everything returns to what it once was, only forward motion. And within that motion, everything that has entered continues to move in some form. The fragments do not stop drifting. Life does not stop adapting. The interactions do not stop repeating. And so the pattern holds, not because it is stable, but because it is ongoing. This is what makes it difficult to step outside of it. There is no boundary to cross, no edge where the pattern ends and something else begins. Only continuation from one moment to the next, from one place to another, always shifting, always reforming, but never disappearing. And in that quiet continuity, something has changed in a way that cannot be easily reversed, not because it is fixed, but because it is in motion everywhere at once. The ocean continues as it always has, but within it there is now a pattern that did not exist before, a pattern that does not end, only continues. The things we let go. It rarely begins with intention. No one stands at the edge of the ocean and decides to create something that will remain for decades. There is no single moment where the outcome is clear. Only small actions. A bottle, finished and placed aside. A wrapper, folded and forgotten. A bag carried briefly, then released. Once it is no longer needed. Each one simple, each one ordinary. So ordinary that it does not feel like a decision at all. Just a moment, moving into the next. And yet, this is where the path begins. Not at the ocean, but far from it. On streets, in homes, in places where water is not even in sight. What is let go here does not stay here. It moves, carried by wind, drawn into drains, washed into rivers that continue without pause towards something larger. There is no clear point where land ends and the journey to the ocean begins. Only a gradual transition from stillness to movement. A small object leaves one place and enters a system that does not return it. Once it begins to move, it becomes part of something larger than intention. It no longer belongs to the moment it was discarded. It belongs to the path that carries it forward, and that path does not end quickly. Rivers do not stop at the places we stop paying attention. They continue through cities, across distances, into wider bodies of water that connect to something even larger, and eventually, almost without resistance, they reach the ocean. There is something quiet about this transition, no clear boundary crossed, no moment marked as significant, only continuation. The same movement that carried water now carries what has been left behind, and the ocean, as it always has, receives it without question, without refusal. It does not send it back. It does not separate what should be kept from what should not. It accepts everything that arrives, and in accepting, it begins to carry it in its own way. What was once still becomes drifting. What was once held in a single place begins to move across distances too large to follow. There is no longer a connection between the object and the moment it was used. That moment has ended, but the object continues, and because it continues, it becomes part of something that does not belong to a single place or a single time. This is what it means to let something go without knowing where it goes. It does not disappear. It moves beyond sight, and once it does, it becomes easy to believe that it is no longer there. But the ocean holds what leaves our attention. It gathers what we no longer see, not as a collection of individual moments, but as a continuous presence. Each small action enters this system without resistance, and once inside, it is no longer separate from everything else that has entered before it. It joins a pattern, a movement that has no single origin and no clear end. There is something quiet about this realization, not sudden, not overwhelming, just a slow understanding that what is released does not vanish. It continues, carried by paths that do not return. And over time, these countless small moments become something larger than any one of them, not through intention, but through accumulation, through repetition, through the simple act of letting go again and again, until what was once a single, ordinary moment becomes part of a system that never stops moving. And the ocean, patient as ever, continues to receive everything we choose not to keep. The distance between use and consequence. Most things in our lives are used close to where they end. Food is eaten, then gone. Paper is written on, then discarded. Objects move through our hands and disappear from our awareness. Not long after, there is a sense of completion in this, a beginning, a use, an end. And because the end happens near us, it feels contained. But some things do not end where they are used. They travel, not visibly, not in a way that can be followed easily, but steadily. A bottle dropped does not remain where it falls. A fragment carried by wind does not stay where it lands. There is always a next movement, a shift from stillness into motion. And once that motion begins, distance starts to grow between the moment of use and what follows after. At first, the distance is small, a few steps, a short path, something still within reach if attention remains. But attention does not always remain. Life continues. Moments replace one another, and what has been left behind moves on without being followed. This is where the separation begins, not in space alone, but in awareness. The object continues its journey, but the memory of it does not. And as the distance grows, the connection weakens. What was once part of a specific moment becomes something without a clear origin. By the time it reaches the ocean, it no longer carries the sense of where it came from, not in a way that can be recognized, only in its form, which remains long after its purpose is gone. This is the quiet distance between use and consequence, not a sudden break, but a gradual fading of connection. What we see and what continues move apart, and because they move apart, it becomes easier to think of them as separate things. The object was used, then it was gone. The ocean is somewhere else, something distant, something unrelated to the moment that has passed. But the path between them is continuous, unbroken. Every step from use to movement to distance to arrival happens within the same system. Only our awareness does not follow each step, and so the consequence feels far away, not because it is far in time, but because it is far from where we are looking. There is something quiet about this separation. It does not create tension. It does not demand that we reconnect the path. It simply allows the two ends to exist without meeting. The moment of use remains here. The continuation moves elsewhere, and because they do not overlap, they do not feel like part of the same story, but they are connected through movement, through systems that do not pause when attention fades. The river continues, whether it is watched or not. The current carries, whether it is noticed or not, and the ocean receives, whether it is considered or not. This is how something small can become something vast without ever feeling large at the moment it begins, because the beginning and the consequence are separated by distance, and in that distance the connection becomes quiet, almost invisible, until it is no longer something we experience directly, but something that exists somewhere else, and yet it is still part of the same path, a path that does not break, only continues beyond where we choose to stop looking. And in that quiet continuation, the ocean becomes the place where all those unseen endings finally arrive, not as separate moments, but as one continuous presence formed by everything that was once simply used and let go. The system that never stops. Nothing in this process relies on a single moment. It is not one action that carries something to the ocean. It is a system, a continuous movement that does not pause when one moment ends and another begins. Water flows through places we do not follow, through pipes beneath cities, through channels that guide it away from where we live. It carries what enters it without hesitation. There is no question of where something should go, only direction. Forward from smaller paths into larger ones, from streets into drains, from drains into rivers, from rivers into the sea. Each step connected to the next, not by intention, but by design that has existed long before we noticed what it carries. This system was not built to hold what cannot dissolve. It was built to move water, to prevent flooding, to keep cities functioning, to guide what flows away from where it accumulates. And it does this very well. It does not stop, not at night, not when we are no longer aware of it. It continues in the background of everything else, and because it continues, anything that enters it continues too. There is no place within this system where something is meant to remain, only places where it passes through. And so what is discarded does not settle It moves, carried from one point to another until it reaches a place large enough to receive everything without resistance. The ocean, there is something quiet about how complete this movement is. No gaps, no breaks. From the moment something is released, there is already a path waiting for it. A path that does not need to be created. A path that already exists and simply continues to carry what enters it. This is what makes the system so effective. It does not depend on attention. It does not require that anyone follows what is being moved. It operates whether it is seen or not. And because of that, it becomes easy to forget that it is there. The water disappears from the surface of the street. The object is no longer where it was left, and so it feels as if it has been removed, as if the process has ended, but it has not ended. It has only continued beyond visibility. This is the nature of systems that never stop. They do not require constant awareness to function. They do not pause when we are no longer looking. They simply move what is given to them forward, and over time, this forward movement connects countless moments into a single, continuous flow. Not one action, but many. Not one place, but everywhere, all feeding into the same direction. There is something almost invisible about this kind of connection, because each step feels separate when experienced on its own. A street, a drain, a river, the ocean, each one a different place. But within the system, they are not separate. They are parts of the same movement, and so the path does not need to be completed in a single moment. It completes itself through continuity, one step flowing into the next, until everything that has entered arrives somewhere else, and that somewhere does not refuse. It receives again and again without pause, because the system that carries everything forward never stops, and as long as it continues, what is let go will continue with it, moving beyond the point where it can be seen into a place that holds what the system was never meant to carry, but carries all the same. The scale we do not feel. There are things that are easy to understand when they are small. A single object can be seen, held, remembered. Its presence is clear. Its impact feels contained. But scale changes everything. When something becomes large, not in one place, but across many places at once, it becomes harder to feel, not because it is less real, but because it is more spread out than our attention can follow. A single piece of plastic is easy to notice, but millions of pieces moving across the ocean do not appear as millions. They appear as nothing, not because they are gone, but because they are too dispersed to form a single image in the mind. This is the scale we do not feel. It does not gather into something visible. It does not concentrate into a form that demands recognition. It exists across distance, and because it exists across distance, it becomes difficult to experience as a whole. The human mind is not built to hold something that is everywhere at once. It looks for boundaries, for shapes, for limits, but here there are none that can be easily seen. Only distribution, fragments carried across vast areas of the ocean, some near the surface, some below it, some moving slowly in patterns that repeat without end, each one small, each one quiet, and because each one feels insignificant. The whole feels distant, not because it is far away, but because it is too large to be held in a single moment of awareness. There is something subtle about this kind of distance. It is not measured in kilometers. It is measured in perception. The further something spreads, the harder it becomes to experience directly, and what cannot be experienced directly is often understood only in fragments. A statistic, a number, an idea that points to something larger but never fully contains it. But the ocean does not experience in fragments. It holds everything as a whole. Every piece, no matter how small, exists within the same system. Every movement is part of the same flow. And so, what feels scattered to us is continuous to the ocean. There is no separation between one fragment and another, only presence, spread across space, but held within the same movement. This is what makes the scale so difficult to grasp, because it is not concentrated in a way that can be seen. It is distributed in a way that can only be understood over time, through patterns, through repetition, through the quiet realization that what seems small is not small when it continues without end. And still, the surface of the ocean remains unchanged to the eye. Blue, open, endless. There is no visible weight to what it carries. No sign, but something vast exists within it. Only movement, only the same rhythm that has always been there. And beneath that rhythm, a scale that does not announce itself, a presence that cannot be felt all at once, but is always there, carried across distance, held within a system that never stops. And because it never stops, it continues to grow in a way that does not feel like growth, until one day it is no longer something that can be thought of as separate pieces, but as something whole, something that exists not in one place, but in many places at once. A scale that is not seen in a single moment, but is always present in movement that never ends. The ocean that keeps. The ocean does not refuse. It does not turn anything away that reaches it. There is no boundary at its edge where something is stopped and sent back. Only acceptance. What arrives remains, not always in the same place, not always in the same form, but within the same movement. The ocean has always been this way. It receives rivers without question. It receives rain without hesitation. It gathers everything that flows toward it, and in doing so, it becomes something larger than any one thing that enters it. But there is a difference now. What it receives does not always return to the cycle it once held so completely. There are things that remain without becoming something else, things that continue without dissolving, and so the ocean keeps them, not because it chooses to, not because it can change what it is given, but because it cannot refuse. There is something quiet about this kind of keeping. It is not active. It does not collect with intention. It simply holds what continues to arrive, and over time, what is held becomes part of what exists within it, not as something separate, not as something clearly defined, but as a presence that does not leave. The ocean does not forget in the way we forget. It does not lose track of what has entered it. It carries everything forward, even what we no longer remember. A bottle that was once used for a moment, a fragment that broke away from something larger. Each one continues long after the moment that created it has passed, and in continuing, they become part of something that does not end with that moment. There is no separation between what was and what remains, only continuity. The ocean holds this continuity without interruption, not as a record that can be read, but as a movement that never stops. Everything that enters becomes part of that movement, carried forward through currents that do not pause, through depths that do not return easily to the surface, through patterns that repeat without conclusion. And because it never stops, nothing truly leaves. It only changes position, changes form, moves beyond where it can be seen, but it remains. This is what it means for the ocean to keep, not to store, not to contain in a fixed place, but to continue what has already begun, to carry forward what has been given without interruption. There is something almost gentle about this. No resistance, no rejection, only acceptance that does not end. And within that acceptance, everything we release finds a place, not because it belongs, but because it cannot be turned away. The ocean keeps what we let go, not as a memory we can revisit, but as a presence that continues whether we follow it or not. And in that quiet keeping, there is a question that does not need to be spoken loudly. If the ocean holds everything we leave behind, what is it that we are asking it to hold now? What we do not see, we do not hold. There is a quiet distance between what we see and what we feel responsible for. Things that remain in front of us are difficult to ignore. A broken object on the ground, a stain that does not disappear. They stay within reach of our attention, and because they stay, they ask something from us. But what moves out of sight becomes something else, not gone, not ended, just elsewhere. And in that distance, something changes in how we relate to it. The connection softens, the moment passes. What was once part of a specific action no longer feels connected to anything that continues. This is how something real becomes abstract, not because it is unclear, but because it is no longer visible. The ocean is far from most moments where things are used. It is not present when something is discarded. It is not there when something is forgotten. And because it is not there, it does not feel like part of the same story. The action happens here. The continuation happens somewhere else. And between those 2 points, there is a space where attention fades. In that space, the connection is not broken. It is simply not followed. And what is not followed becomes difficult to hold in the mind, not because it disappears, but because it no longer demands presence. There is something quiet about this kind of separation. It does not create resistance. It does not create conflict. It allows things to move beyond awareness without being questioned. And so the ocean receives what we do not see. It gathers what leaves our attention, not as isolated events, but as a continuous flow of things that were once present and are now elsewhere. This is why it is difficult to fully feel the scale of what continues, because it is not held in a single image, not experienced in a single moment, only understood in fragments. A thought here, a number there, but never the whole. And without the whole, it becomes easier to remain at a distance, not intentionally, not by choice, but by the quiet way attention works. What is near feels real. What is far feels abstract. And the ocean, for most moments of daily life, is far, even though everything that reaches it has come from somewhere close. There is something almost paradoxical in this. What begins near ends far away, and in that distance, the beginning and the end no longer feel connected, but they are connected through movement, through systems that do not pause when awareness fades, through continuity that does not require that we follow it to continue. The ocean holds what we do not see, and because we do not see it, it becomes difficult to hold it in the same way. Not impossible, just quiet, distant, easy to place, just beyond the center of attention, and yet it remains, not waiting to be seen, not asking to be noticed, only continuing within a system that does not stop. And in that quiet continuation, the question returns without urgency. If what we do not see is still there, then what does it mean to truly let something go? The weight that does not feel heavy. There are things that feel heavy the moment we carry them, a physical weight in the hands, a resistance that cannot be ignored. We feel it immediately, we adjust, we respond. But there are other kinds of weight that do not feel like weight at all, not because they are small, but because they are spread out over time. A single moment does not feel heavy. A single action does not feel like it carries anything beyond itself. It happens and then it is gone. And because it is gone so quickly, it does not leave a strong impression of consequence. This is how something can grow without ever feeling like it is growing, not by becoming larger in one moment, but by repeating across many moments, each one light, each one easy, so light that it does not feel like anything at all. And yet, when these moments are placed together, they begin to form something that has weight, not in a way that can be lifted, not in a way that can be measured by a single experience, but in a way that exists across time. The ocean carries this weight, not as something concentrated in one place, but as something distributed across its entire movement. Each fragment small, each one barely noticeable, and yet together they form something that does not disappear. This is the weight that does not feel heavy because it is not experienced all at once. It is experienced as absence, the absence of resistance when something is discarded, the absence of consequence in the moment of use. Nothing pushes back, nothing demands that we carry it further, and so it feels as if nothing has been carried at all. But the movement does not end there. It continues beyond the moment where the weight would have been felt. And because it continues elsewhere, it becomes something that is no longer connected to the sensation of carrying. There is something quiet about this kind of weight. It does not create urgency. It does not interrupt the flow of daily life. It remains outside of immediate experience, and yet it exists, accumulating not through force, but through repetition. A small moment followed by another, then another, each one light, each one easy, until together they form something that cannot be undone by a single moment. In return, the ocean holds this accumulation without resistance. It does not react to the weight it carries. It does not change its surface to reflect what is within it. It remains calm, open, unchanged to the eye, and because it appears unchanged, the weight it carries does not feel present, not in the way that something visible would feel present only in a quieter way, a presence that exists without being felt directly. And this is what makes it so difficult to fully recognize, because what is not felt as weight does not ask to be set down. It continues, carried forward by systems that do not pause, held within a space that does not refuse. And over time, what once felt like nothing becomes something that remains, not because it was heavy in any one moment, but because it was never truly released, only moved beyond the point where its weight could be felt. And the ocean, as it always has, continues to carry it quietly, without interruption, holding a weight that does not feel heavy, but never disappears. What remains with us? At the edge of all this, there is no clear conclusion. The ocean continues, the currents turn, everything that has entered keeps moving, nothing stops at the end of a story. And yet, something remains with us, not in the ocean, not in the drifting fragments, but here, a quiet awareness that was not there before, not loud, not urgent, just present, the understanding that what leaves our hands does not leave the world. It continues beyond sight, beyond attention, but not beyond consequence. There is no need to imagine something overwhelming, no need to hold the entire scale in a single thought, because that is not how this was formed. It was formed through small moments, and it is understood in the same way, one moment at a time, a single object held a little longer before being released, a brief pause before letting something go, not as a solution, not as a correction to everything that has already happened, but as a shift in awareness, a recognition that the path continues even when we stop following it. There is something gentle about this kind of realization. It does not demand change all at once. It does not ask for something impossible. It simply stays quietly present in the moments where choices are made, not as pressure, not as weight, but as awareness. And awareness moves differently than urgency. It does not rush, it remains. It returns in small, ordinary moments, when something is used, when something is about to be let go. It is there, not forcing a different action, but offering a different way of seeing the same action. That what seems small does not end where it begins. That what feels like an ending may only be a continuation in another place. The ocean does not ask us to change. It does not send anything back as a reminder. It simply carries what it is given, and in that quiet carrying, it reflects something back to us without needing to speak. That what remains in the world is shaped not by a single moment, but by many, and those moments are still happening here, now. There is no final image to hold on to, no single scene that captures everything that has been said, only a continuation. The ocean moving as it always has, the currents turning without pause, and within that movement, everything that has been placed into it, still there, still moving, still part of the same story. And here on land, far from where those currents turn, something remains with us. Not the ocean itself, but the awareness of what continues within it, quiet, unseen, but present. And perhaps that is where this story truly stays, not in the water, but in the way we begin to see what we once thought had already ended.